About March 7th or 8th of last year, one of the Broad Institute sort of affiliate faculty members, Deb Hung, who is an infectious disease doc at Brigham and Women's Hospital also, came to us at the genomics group within the institute and said, I think Boston's going to need more diagnostic capacity than we have. And so within days, we actually had mobilized. I think none of us thought that just under a year later, we would be sitting on having done our 12 millionth test. Prior to COVID, the typical timeline for going from an idea to a real clinical test, at least a year. But by March 23rd, roughly 3 weeks later, we actually started running our first clinical test. Now, with the latest versions of the test we are running approximately 100 to 120,000 tests a day.
Niall really took the lead in figuring out how we were going to approach getting that test clinically validated. And then after we clinically validated it, applying to the FDA to be able to get what's called an EUA, an emergency use authorization. We have iterated the assay a couple times to be responding to both an increased need of scale of our test, and also there are different variants of the virus that are emerging. Each time we make a change like that, we have to go back to the FDA to seek approval. That is work that Niall is continually doing. We've been told many times, particularly by the state of Massachusetts, that they've been able to expand testing here so widely to all the nursing homes, to congregate care, to homeless shelters, because they know they can turn to us for this very affordable test that's priced at a fraction of what they might pay if it were a commercial lab.
When the outbreak happened at the Holyoke Soldiers Home, my boss got on the phone with me and said, they need help right now, can you get on the road and start driving there? It's kind of like walking into the middle of a burning building. You're trying to figure out what you can save and how you can do it as quickly as possible. When I arrived at the Soldiers Home, we discovered that COVID was spreading through the building and we were in the middle of a crisis. People were still testing positive months later, and we didn't know if it was a second outbreak or not. And that's where we needed to get not just the yes-no data of the tests, but what the numbers underneath meant. We talked to other testing partners and said, hey, we have an issue. It is an important one that is causing a lot of difficulty. Niall's the one who got back to us. Everyone else, it's a pandemic, but everyone else was too busy to talk to us. And it wasn't until we had that information that we could give them some ease of mind, because they felt like they were reliving parts of a nightmare that they had already been through once.
If we didn't have Niall on the team, it's really hard for me to imagine we would have arrived at the place we are today. He's just such an integral member of this very, I would say, tight-knit leadership team where we all bring a set of skills that are really needed to make this kind of progress. Niall's piece of the puzzle is, one might say, the most important of them in terms of having that clinical eye to the test.
Niall is kind, accessible, and most importantly, he's generous with his time. He knew that we needed advice, and we probably knew he had a million other things to be doing during that time. Took all of our questions seriously and got back to us. It's the kind of kindness and partnership that you need when you're dealing with a potential crisis.
Went to university in Ireland. I studied science, and I did a PhD there. Didn't know anybody in Boston, didn't really know anything about Boston. I set up a networking association for Irish scientists in America. And it was through that I ended up having a conversation with a scientist who at the time was working at a place called the Whitehead Institute. And he said, well, we're about to launch this thing called the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, and you should come over. We work in the genomic space. We just finished sequencing the human genome. So I did. I came over and I interviewed, and that was 15 years ago. The ability to actually offer testing to a community has been something that we could do that has a short-term impact, a short and real impact to the community. I personally am very thankful that we've been able to contribute in this way to the community. to the Boston community, the Massachusetts community, and the New England community. It's meant that people have the peace of mind.